Kelsey, Coots, are you with us this morning?
Hi, how are you guys?
Hello, Kelsey.
All right, you've got Jim and Margie here, and we really thank you for taking time to call in to be part of our Bradford and Brooks radio show here on WBRT.
Of course, thanks for having me on.
Well, as we were discussing before we went on the air, you're seeking the Democratic nominee as state auditor, and a lot of people, they hear that office come around every 4 years during an election. But tell our listeners a little bit about you, your background, and why you jumped in the race, and what you would like to bring to the auditor's office.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Everywhere that I go, whenever I'm speaking to folks, I like to just give a little bit of my background, so thanks for the opportunity. But I grew up in Owensboro in western Kentucky, and my grandfather coached basketball at Owensboro High School for 37 years. So I tell folks that I was raised in basketball gyms across Kentucky. And I was really raised by my Kentucky community. And, you know, in Owensboro, it's a big little town. I was taught values like honesty, compassion, respect, just like, in most Kentucky communities. But really what was modeled for me the most was how people in my town showed up for each other. And so, I've tried to do that throughout my life. And then I ultimately, after graduating in Owensboro, went to UK, and then I became a teacher. Whenever I became a teacher, that took me to Houston, Texas, and really that was the first time in my adult life that I was faced with the impossible odds that families face, and how, a lot of society systems are leaving folks behind. So fast forward, I moved back to Kentucky, started teaching in the Jefferson County public school system, and I really began to realize that issues that my students and families were facing here and that were plaguing our communities, they were very similar to the ones I found in Texas. However, I couldn't ignore it anymore, because this is, not Texas. This is Kentucky. This is our home. And so that led to me really getting involved in a variety of ways inside of my school and outside of my school. Inside of the classroom and at my school, I am an advocate for my colleagues, for my students, and outside I'm an advocate for my colleagues in my profession. But honestly, I've never felt like I've been doing enough, because, I think many people would agree that the Kentucky that I know, or that a lot of us grew up in, it seems to be slowly becoming unrecognizable. I think that our leaders in Frankfort are, rolling back our gains in healthcare, trampling workers' rights, working to gut public education, and are doing things to institute a two-tiered system of Kentucky, and I reject that. I got involved heavily last year in the 120 Strong movement outside of my school to push back against Governor Bevin's sham pension reform. And, I really had a front row seat to how government is not transparent and is really not working for working people. And so I started to look, and honestly, you've probably seen on Facebook those articles that get shared that say that Kentucky is now the most corrupt state in the nation. It's been, proven by multiple assessments and scholarly experts. And frankly, for me, as a teacher in a revenue-strapped state like Kentucky, $1 that's wasted to inefficiency or fraud or abuse is $1 that's not only too many, but that's $1 that doesn't go back to the 125 kids that look back at me in my classroom daily as kids that are just like them across the Commonwealth. So that's really why I got in the race. I feel like government isn't working for us, and I feel like we could be doing a much better job in terms of performing a service for taxpayers. And so really what I want to do, to the last part of your question, in the auditor's office, is I think that we have a deficit in terms of trust in our government. And so everything that has to do with my platform, and I make the case I'm the only candidate in the race that has a complete vision and a complete platform for the auditor's office, has to do with restoring trust in government, and that's twofold. So that is through strengthening accountability and increasing transparency. And, I don't like those words in terms of I almost feel like they've become a little bit of buzzwords, I'm sure. I feel like every political candidate talks about accountability and transparency. So I've really outlined some strategic objectives, and I invite anybody listening they can check those detailed plans out on my website at kelseyforkentucky.com. But a lot of it has to do with the democratization of the information that comes out of the auditor's website. I frankly believe that you all should be able to go, or any taxpayer, on the auditor's website, say you want to get audits that have to do with Nelson County or whatever county in the Commonwealth that you live, so that you can understand that your taxpayer dollars are being spent in good faith. And then when you guys get those audits sent to you when you sign up, that they are in a format that you can easily read and understand. Also for those folks out there that are practicing good government whenever they get audited, PDAs, county clerks, anybody that receives taxpayer dollars that gets audited by the auditor's office, I believe that they should be sort of recognized for practicing that good government, again, so people within their county know that their money is being spent in good faith. So again, I invite any leaders any listeners to go to my website, kelseyforkentucky.com, and really read more about the strategic plan and the strategic objectives underneath the umbrella of transparency and accountability. And I'd be more than happy to connect with anybody if they have any feedback or want to know more.
Kelsey, are there any particular audits that you have in mind of institutions or agencies that you particularly want to focus on?
Yeah, so first thing I say is, I'm going into the office. I think it's a little bit about, or it's more than about just picking the targets. It's also about ensuring that, the office itself is operating efficiently and ensuring that the information that gets put out is accessible to folks. So as soon as I got into office, I would be focusing on that, the systems and processes that the office and, partakes in, and then also from the other side. So I would be talking with offices that get audited, to see from their point of view how things operate. But then, to your point, our current auditor has not audited any public school systems. And something that I think that was extremely successful by a former auditor was the audit of the Jefferson County public school system. That, frankly, was, in my opinion as a teacher, was one of the best things that happened in the Jefferson County public school system in the last 10 years. Because not only did that reveal, thousands and thousands of dollars that were being spent in central office and not being put into classrooms, it led to, our superintendent moving on. Now we have an incredible superintendent, but it also reorganized funds so they were going to be spent for kids, which is what their purpose is. The first superintendent in America to go to jail was right here in Kentucky, in Dayton, Kentucky. As I talk to, as I give that information to folks across the Commonwealth, I get a lot of information back of people saying that they believe, potentially that they would like their school district audited. So that would be something that I would focus on because, like I said, whenever previous auditors focused on that, there were findings, but the current auditor has not done any of that.
Well, I'm sure Adam Edlin will thank you for that endorsement.
Well, as I said, previous auditors, but it's just what I always say whenever I'm out talking to groups is, Crit Llewellyn really is a model in terms of how auditors go. She, was an independent watchdog, and that's what I would want to be, and that's how I will view the office. But the past few auditors before our current auditor, they had programs that let folks into every layer of government, whether it was hospitals, school boards, water boards, and again, just made information more accessible to the people. So when earlier I was talking about the democratization of the office, I mean, anybody that gets on the auditor's website right now, it looks like it was made in 1994. And if you wanted to go see what the auditor's office, how audits were, delivered or what's happening within your county, it's extremely hard to navigate. And then once you can find the information, it's extremely hard to understand if you are just a person, a layperson that doesn't look at that information all the time. And I think that not only is that office supposed to be, like I said, an independent watchdog for taxpayer dollars, but we're performing a service for Kentuckians, and that information should be as accessible as possible. I also think there is a program currently in place that's been in place for a while called the Safe House program. That's the program that taxpayers can go and anonymously report waste, fraud, or abuse of taxpayer dollars in any place that they may suspect that it's happening. And then, it's like a tip line, essentially. But, I go and talk to folks about that, and no one knows about it. And so, again, part of my plan in increasing trust in government is really also expanding that program and making sure that it's more well-known throughout our communities. Because, again, I said earlier, I think that some of our leaders are tired of, or they're instituting policies that make us 48th and everything. But again, we seem to be number one in corruption. And I actually have a TV ad that released today, that has to do with that. It says that, from the basketball courts to our classrooms, we want to be the best. But obviously we don't want to be the best in corruption, and that's currently where we are. So that is, in a nutshell, again, about, yes, I say that I'm the only candidate in the race that has a complete plan, because those words of accountability and transparency aren't just buzzwords. And not only do, I have a plan about specific places that I would maybe want to audit, like I said, starting with public schools, but, it's more than about just picking the targets. It's about how do we open up the entire office to better serve taxpayers, because I like to say that government works best whenever you shine a light on it.
Well, Kelsey, I'm kind of, I guess, since I'm not an educator, and I don't, I'm a journalist, and I do attend school board meetings here locally, and I know that the local boards, all the districts have to go through their own audits, et cetera. But I'm kind of surprised that the bigger districts like Fayette and Jefferson and some of the other ones aren't audited by the auditor's office. Is there does this look like a political decision to you, or just a decision on, you can only do so much with the office you have? Because it seems to me that those would be the prime places to look to make sure that tax dollars are being well spent.
Yes. So the auditor's office can audit anything that receives taxpayer dollars. And so they audit all of state government. But yes, public schools, in public school systems, they fall under what we would call a special examination. So they won't get audited by the auditor's office unless the auditor calls for that to be one of their special examinations.
Okay, I see. So it's really, as auditor, it would be your call.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
There's a lot of people. That's one thing. Auditor is not one of the most exciting races that people usually look at. People always are want to know who's running for Secretary of State or Attorney General or some of those. But the auditor's office is so important, because, to your point, the auditor really does have a lot of discretion in terms of, in terms of who they would want to choose to audit. And again, there are processes in place to help determine that, or there are, things like the Safe House program that I mentioned earlier, where, auditors can get, tipped off if people somewhere think that there is fraud or abuse suspected. But, that is an extremely important office in terms of putting a check on government and just ensuring, like I said, I think Crit Llewellyn a while back had an ad whenever she ran one of the times, and it was a cookie jar, and it had her nephew or somebody coming to put their hand in the cookie jar. And when she's kind of delivering the ad, she looked back and she caught her nephew putting his hand in the cookie jar. I mean, it really is what the auditor does. It just ensures that, taxpayer dollars are being spent in an efficient and proper way.
Okay. You mentioned the Safe House program. I'm probably like a lot of other taxpayers. I may have heard that term before, but it feels like I'm hearing it for the first time, that there's such a resource available for people who wish to point out, potential misuse of tax dollars.
Yeah, so it is, there's a phone number that you could call. It's 1-800-KY-ALERT, but it's also online, and it is, again, the place that people can anonymously report waste, fraud, or abuse. So the SAFE in the SAFE House, it stands for Secure, Anonymous, and File Encrypted. That's where that term comes from, or when you see it maybe printed, SAFE is in all caps. And so you could call through the tip line, or if you go to the auditor's website, again, which is not very accessible, except on the website, it's like a big yellow block, so that's one of the things you can see. There are instructions where people could go in there, again, to anonymously report something. I mean, you could even scan in documents if you like had something like that. But yeah, I mean, in my opinion, that should be something that's extremely well known. PSAs could happen throughout the Commonwealth, not something that would say the auditor's name, because in my mind that would be, too political in terms of spending taxpayer dollars for that. But that is something that I think that you could get a lot of bang for your buck at. Also, I think in places like offices, like county clerk's offices or other places where, taxpayer dollars are used to fund those offices, I think that information should be readily available. And a lot of what I compare it to is, when you go to the gas pump and you see there's a little sticker that shows that the gas pump has been inspected by the Commissioner of Agriculture. Something like that, where anywhere that you're going that operates off of taxpayer dollars or is benefited from that in a large way, that information is readily available to where taxpayers and people understand that that's a service that they could use.
It sounds like that public education about the auditor's office and about detecting corruption or what fraud, waste, and abuse sounds like that would be a considerable plank in your program.
Yes, like I said, I mean, one of the best things that I think happened in JCPS was that audit, because hundreds of thousands of dollars were found, being spent, again, kind of at the top of the pyramid. And they ended up being, because of the audit, reappropriated to where they were put back in classrooms. And, I think that's probably going to be found in a lot of places, that, money is disproportionately being spent at the top.
Well, Kelsey, I wanted to ask, I know that as a teacher, what's been the response you've gotten from other teachers as well? Because I think that, we have seen a lot of teachers getting involved in either running for office or just being active and speaking out now after all of the issues regarding pension reform, et cetera. So what's been the reception you've gotten from other teachers?
People are really excited. I think more than anything, people are just excited to have someone new being offered up, a different type of candidate. So not only am I a teacher and I understand, what they live every day, other teachers and other public employees, because we've sort of been in this pension fight together or pushing back against the attacks on public education. But, folks are just ready to be for something, and they're ready to have a different type of candidate, like I said. So not only me being a teacher, but me being, a union member, a working person, a young person, I've received a ton of enthusiasm and grassroots support surrounding our campaign. I've been so thankful and humbled to be endorsed by the Jefferson County Teachers Association, along with 5 other unions, and some other elected leaders like State Senator Reggie Thomas, former mayor of Lexington, Jim Gray, because I think people just understand that it's time for new energy and a new perspective in state government. We need problem solvers, and if anybody in the world is a problem solver, it's a middle school teacher, because I teach 8th grade.
Any particular? What classes do you specialize in? Just curious.
So I teach 8th grade language arts.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's you've got that middle school years are very interesting years of transition in our young people's lives. So, thanks to you for getting involved and teachers make such a huge difference in our children's lives, and as a parent sometimes I think we may not realize what a positive influence our teachers are.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, because it's also Teacher Appreciation Week.
That's right.
That's very, very timely. But, I get the question a lot, again, of why the auditor's office? Because I'm a teacher. And frankly, I told you a little bit earlier, because of, if we're number one in corruption, that money that's being wasted or being used inefficiently isn't not only money that doesn't go to our classrooms, it doesn't go to our communities that can benefit our kids. But like I said, a lot of my platform has to do with restoring trust in government, increasing accountability and transparency. But that, like I said earlier, with the democratization of the office, that's about breaking down, harder, complex topics and making it more accessible to everyday people. And, I argue that, frankly, I do that every day, and making topics more accessible to my kids. So I feel like the office is a great fit. I feel like my passion for restoring transparency and shining a light on government for taxpayers is, it's going to be a good fit. And I hope that your listeners will give me a chance to become the nominee and give, it a shot in November. So, anybody that's listening, I would humbly ask for your vote and your support, and I invite anybody to go to kelseyforkentucky.com and check out more or learn more about me and my platform.
Kelsey, how would you make it more transparent, say on the websites or in people contacting the auditor's office? How would you make it more transparent and more easy to negotiate?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is I would put all of the expenses and everything that the auditor's office itself spends money on accessible on the website. I would publish those things on the website. So if I'm, preaching transparency, then it would start with us. Next, I would totally overhaul the auditor's website and make it more accessible and navigable for all. Third, I would institute the program, like I was talking about earlier, where anybody could go and select their county and maybe an interest that they have. So like Nelson County, education, or Jefferson County education, whatever. And any audits that have to do with those two things, they get sent directly to the people that sign up for them. Because right now it's maybe a press release is done or maybe it's tweeted out, but unless you're looking for that information, it's extremely hard to find and it's extremely hard to come by. And then if you do find it, like I said, it's harder to read. I mean, we live right now, I think, in the infographic era.
Right.
So outside of the very large and long audits that are released, I do believe that we should do a better job about communicating that information. And if there are findings in an audit, what do those findings mean, right? Does that mean somebody was deliberately stealing money? Does it mean it's an accounting error? I mean, it's really how do we communicate and just sort of rethink a little bit how we do business in the office? Because there is, the auditors that audit in the office, the merit employees that are highly trained, that are there doing the audits from day to day. They do great work, but it's how do we, again, communicate that to taxpayers and ensure that the office is as navigable as possible.
Well, Kelsey, I know that, reporting or finding waste, fraud, and abuse is a critical part, I think, of managing state government because, I've been, I go to the local school board meetings, and both districts that I report on, both are, they're working on their tentative budgets for the the upcoming school year, and they're both looking at trying to anticipate what their SEEK money is going to be and how big a hit they may, how much they may lose on that, and it's a big, the budget takes a lot of. There's a lot of numbers to juggle in that, and and any. I don't think any school is overfunded. Any school district has too much money.
Not. Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it'd be like for a JCPS given the size of that district. But I can see that, making sure all tax dollars are well spent is crucial, especially in a district as large as JCPS. But even in our local district, we want our money well spent and, as much as possible go into the classroom where it's needed.
Absolutely. And something that we haven't really touched on yet, but I think, also is important is if you think about the auditor's office, the way I view it is that it should be, it should also help offices that get audited be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. So, for example, if you work in a PVA's office, and you're new or people in your office need training on how to appropriately account for certain things, or they want to know, what are best practices for that, then I believe that the auditor's office should be a resource for that, because, want to assume that, we want people to practice good ethical government, right? So we should be a partner in helping ensure that happens.
Well, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to do with being ethical. It has to do with being competent, having to learning skills that you might not know.
Yep.
Yeah, and I agree, because I think in just about every profession you've got you need to have continuing education, and so even in helping an office with their financial duties, or learning what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, that would seem to be an excellent way to bring your office to assist others.
Yes, and again, remember the goal is just about trust in government. So we want, also to celebrate those who are practicing good ethical government. We want taxpayers to understand whenever their government is doing that, or whenever people within their counties are doing that, or just, state government as a whole. So, it's all connected. I think of it as an umbrella, kind of that trust piece at the top, and then how do all of the strategic objectives, or how do all the priorities within the auditor's office help us get back to, restoring that trust and faith in government.
Well, Kelsey, I know that the auditor's office isn't at the top of the ticket, and a lot of people may not be really sure of all of its duties. But since you've been on the campaign trail, have there any concerns? Any people voice concerns about what they would like, any changes from the current the way the auditor's office is being handled to improvements that you might be able to see to make? Any input from your constituents as you've campaigned?
Yeah, the first question I get all the time is, okay, what's the auditor's office do? And then it's, people don't understand not only what the auditor's office does, but the scope. It's like, the auditor audits all of state government. And then when you tell folks that, they go, oh my gosh, that's really important. And I say exactly, which is why all of my platform is about democratizing the office. People should understand that. And if they want to know and get even, deeper into it on a granular level or a county level, they should be able to access that too. So I hear that the most. Again, I also get that question about kind of what would a focus be if I had to say one thing that I would look at for a special examination in terms of auditing, and I always say schools. I get a lot of feedback of people saying, and they have specific stories about where they think that, maybe too much money is being spent in central office and could be appropriated elsewhere and what have you. So, I just get a lot of people agreeing with me on that school piece. But it's a lot of education from my point of just saying what the auditor's office does, entails, and the service that it provides for taxpayers, which I feel like makes my point of why I'm in the race and what's important to me, and why I think that, the priorities that I've outlined are important to begin with.
Right, and I see that when the state auditor conducts audits, they provide feedback to that to the office or the entity that they've audited of any suggestions for improvements or irregularities from good standard practice, etc. And I think that's crucial too.
Absolutely.
You can't be better if you don't have feedback on how to be better.
Exactly, and that's so interesting you say that. I was talking to somebody recently about that same point, and again, saying teachers, right? It's like we can't give an assessment and then never tell and have a conversation with how students did or what you can do to get better. The goal of the auditor's office is to ensure that, yes, it is to root out waste, fraud, corruption, but it's also to ensure that we are, that people are practicing good government. So how do we also help facilitate that? Right.
And I've seen changes made simply because the auditor's office suggested this may be an improvement. So, the role the auditors play is is an important one.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I would do, I've told folks this, on the very first day, if I were elected and I went and went to the office the first time, I would begin to, and I sort of hate saying it this way because I think it sounds super cheesy, but I would sort of audit the auditors, and that is really interviewing and meeting with everyone that works in the auditor's office, all of those merit employees that are there that are highly trained. Again, they're the ones that do it day to day. They're the ones that interact the most with people being audited. But again, to ensure how can those processes be streamlined and how can we potentially rethink how we communicate kind of what we're doing, not only to taxpayers, but also to those offices, because again, it should be a partnership.
Right. And in fact, those are the people, in your office, they're the ones who are really the boots on the ground in the office. And so they would be the ones close enough to the work to understand, well, here's a way we might improve.
Exactly.
So yeah, that of course that just makes sense to listen to those who have suggestions to improve the overall efficiency. So
exactly, I think the auditor runs the office, sets the tone for how the auditor's office is going to do business, and sort of points the direction, and is the face. But there's deputies that are it's outlined by state statute that they have to be CPAs and all of that. And then again, there are those highly trained auditors. Like I said, there's over 100 of them that work in the office. And so they are absolutely also the experts in terms of, because they are the ones on the front lines.
Kelsey, if in your audits you find some exemplary practices or an exemplary district, would you see that as an opportunity to laud those people and to hold them up as an example?
Absolutely. I put in my platform on my website that I think that people that are practicing good government should be celebrated. And I'm not sure if it would be an award, or some sort of distinction, but exactly what you just said. If I went and I audited the, Nelson County Fiscal Court or something like that, and they were an exemplar or exemplary group, then I believe that they should get that recognition, not only from me, but people in their county should know that. So, I believe that we should create some sort of recognition program, again, so those folks can get, recognized for doing that good work, exactly like you said.
Okay, very good. We're just about down to the wire. We're going to have to take a break in a few minutes. Kelsey, what would you like to leave? What message would you like to leave with the people of Nelson County about your campaign and why you're seeking the office of auditor?
Really, what I want to leave is that I think that Kentucky needs leaders who bring new energy, new passion, and a new perspective to state government. We need problem solvers, not partisans who believe that we can solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. I think that this race is really about choosing a leader with an impactful vision and plan for the auditor's office. Again, I make the case I'm the only one in the race that has really a vision for the office. And you can read about that on kelseyforkentucky.com. But, it's not about choosing, it's about choosing a leader with an impactful vision. It's about choosing somebody who's passionate, a passionate watchdog for taxpayer dollars versus a rubber stamp or somebody who's going to go through the motions. And it's really about having a leader that cares more about what our Commonwealth can be and the actual real work and the service for Kentucky taxpayers versus having somebody that's worried about who wins, or who loses, or who gets credit. And at the beginning of the interview, when you asked me why I'm in this race and kind of what a little bit about my background, I talked about learning in Owensboro how important it is to show up for people. And I think that this election, up and down the ticket, whether it is auditor, or governor, it's about how do we get back to showing up for each other. And so I ask any of your listeners, if you all like what I'm saying or want to know more, again, please connect with me on social media or on my website at kelseyforkentucky.com, and I just humbly ask for your vote on May 21st.
Kelsey, I understand that you are a public school teacher and you are doing this on your lunch hour. So I know the reason you couldn't commit to longer, but I just want to point that out, that to the folks listening, that here's a school teacher who has to work every day but who's made the time out to run for public office and actually using your lunch hour to do that.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I mean, that's just in closing, I think that it's so important. I appreciate you saying that so much, because I think that, if anything in this campaign, we show that for new folks or young folks or working people that, they too can run for office. I think that this is a win. And so that's one reason why we're doing it.
All right. Well, Kelsey, thank you for throwing your hat in the ring and getting involved, and also for your day-to-day job as a teacher. Our teachers are our unsung heroes in my book, and thank you for your service to the Jefferson County community.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on. You guys have a great rest of the show.
All right. Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.